All right, welcome back to the Listen Nissim show. Today I have the privilege of sitting here with Mr. Richard Horowitz. How are you?
Thank God. Terrific.
Thank you for joining us. We're here in your office, but it's not just any regular life insurance office, is it? What's the deal with all these hidden Kiruv staff around here? What's going on?
So what's going on is you walk into my office, and on your left are two people working in Kiev. Take a right turn, you have three people processing life insurance.
How did you end up in America?
So my grandparents all came from Eastern Europe. They came right in the middle. It was basically 1882 to 1924 was Eastern Europeans, and they all came between 1900 and 1910. All four of my grandparents.
Where did they end up? Which state?
They ended up in Hartford, Connecticut.
Do you know what their occupations were?
Absolutely. My father's father was a bread man. He had a horse, he had a wagon, and he went around and delivered bread to people. And my mother's father was a merchant, ended up with a department store, and during the Depression, lost all his money. So my two grandparents, one was a bread man who never made much money, and the other was a merchant who lost all his money.
Did you meet your grandparents?
Yes, I knew all four of my grandparents, which is really terrific.
Do you know what kind of Jewish lifestyle they were living?
Yes, they were all raised Orthodox, and they all gave it up when they came to America.
Do you know why? Did you get to talk to them about that?
No. When I grew up, it's interesting enough, when I grew up, you didn't really talk to your grandparents. I mean, you just didn't talk to your grandparents. Hello, and how are you, and how's everything, and how you doing in school, but you didn't talk to us, which is amazing, because my wife and I are constantly talking to our grandchildren. It's a whole different relationship.
What did your parents do?
My father's specialty was going into businesses that disappeared. So he was a salesman, and he used to call a Yankee peddler. His car was filled with goods, and he'd go out to areas in rural Connecticut where people didn't actually have access to a car or bus line, and he would sell them socks and underwear and work shirts, and what he would do is, where he'd really make his money is when they bought something big, he could take them to wholesale dealers with discounts, and when they would buy something like a refrigerator or a stove or a television or a couch, or when their kids would get engaged, an engagement ring, he'd take them to a place. They would buy it for less money than they could get it otherwise, and he'd make a nice commission. That's where he made his money. And because it was basically all you had was department stores and him. Then, when the discount department stores started showing up in the early and middle 50s, they were selling at the same price that his people were selling at, so all the profit disappeared. So then he became a milkman, which is not simple at age 40. Became a milkman. Of course, the whole idea of having milkmen was dying out. And eventually he went into the real estate business and worked till he was 75 and managed to make a decent living. And my mother, in those days women didn't work, you raised your family, and my mother went out to work to supplement the family income, and she worked for a doctor for many years, and then she did survey work.
Do you have siblings?
2 sisters.
Are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest.
What was life like in terms of traditional Judaism every week?
It didn't exist.
Did you have Shabbat and holidays?
No. We had a Passover Seder. We do the first Passover Seder. My mother's parents with the cousins, and the second night we do a Seder at our house, and the Seder was very short. I don't remember how short, probably 30 minutes the first night, 20 minutes the second night. Never had a Shabbos dinner, never had a Friday night dinner. It was gone. It was just gone. Everything was gone. And that was that generation.
So throughout middle school and high school and college?
Nothing. As my grandmother would have said, garnished mit garnished. Nothing from nothing.
Okay, what did you do in your college days and post-college days,
In Jewishly,
if any?
basically nothing. I went to, when I was at University of Connecticut, I went to services for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. My parents did that. They did Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, going to synagogue, Pesach Seder, that was it. No kosher food, meat and milk. That was a generation that was nothing.
What did you study?
Political science and history. Never got around to graduating. I went to 3 colleges, 5.5 years.
Why was that?
Because there were a lot more things that were interesting to do than studying in college.
What were your years after college like?
I was always sort of business oriented. So it's hard to say after college, because usually you graduate college and there's after college. I never got around to graduating, but I was always interested in politics, and I ran a political campaign when I was in college, and then I went into business. I went into travel business, and then after that, I went into business in London, and neither one of those worked out too well. And I was in a stamp and coin business. My partner was actually running it, and then I came back to Los Angeles and just started from scratch.
Why LA?
It doesn't snow, and one of the businesses I was a partner was in Los Angeles. So my business in London closed down. I just naturally came back to Los Angeles.
So you started from scratch. What does that mean?
That means that I was new to Los Angeles. I had no college degree. I had no profession. I had no job. And I had filed for bankruptcy as a result of the business failures. That's...
Where did you start?
Well, I met my wife around that time.
In LA?
Yeah. And I was basically 2 dates and done. And it took me 3 weeks to convince her. But her father was not so happy. So he said he's going to show me that he can hold a job. And then I'll approve. So they had something called classified ads. So I went through classified ads the next day. And there was an ad for a taxi cab driver. So I went down for an interview. They gave me a test. You probably needed a 90 IQ to pass the test. So I passed the test. And then I showed up at orientation. And it was about a 6-hour orientation. They gave me a cab driver's jacket, cab driver's hat, and I was a taxi driver. So I worked a 6 o'clock shift at night. And I studied for my insurance and securities exam, and eventually, when he saw I could hold a cab driver's job, he figured, okay, maybe I could support a family, so he gave us okay, and we got married. So I got married October 2nd, 1969, finished my bankruptcy in January 1970, went back into business. Didn't work out well. I went broke again in 1972. Back into business again. I went broke again in 1974. Owed a lot of money. Somewhere between our 9th and 10th wedding anniversary, I got our net worth up to zero. Not down to zero, up to zero.
How did you meet her?
Mutual friend.
After you were back at zero, how did you move up?
I just kept working. I kept working in life insurance. And eventually I got pretty good at it and started making a nice living. And then I started giving tzedakah. And somehow things worked out, and all of a sudden I was making a nice six-figure income, and eventually just made a lot of money.
Where did the first drip of Judaism pop back in?
So I was from a generation where everyone had Jewish pride. Everyone had Jewish friends. One of the questions they ask on Jewish population studies is, how many of your 4 closest friends are Jewish? In the 50s and 60s, the answer, the average for the whole country for Jews was 3.5, 3.6. In other words, basically everyone had, or almost everyone, all their 4 closest friends were Jewish. In fact, when I grew up, they asked if your 10 closest friends, we would have been all Jewish. So it was a whole Jewish pride thing, and there was still an understanding that most people wanted to marry Jewish, most people married Jewish. So we realized that our family, Jewishly, was wiped out. And we did want to have Jewish kids, Jewish education, somewhat Jewishly. So when my wife got pregnant, we started to get serious about Judaism. And ultimately, we realized that our children were probably 3rd or 4th generation Jewish illiterates. And we didn't want that. So we put them into a Jewish day school. And things sort of developed from there. Orthodox Jewish day school.
At that point, once you put them in the school, was your family becoming what's called observant?
We were becoming more observant. It was a very foreign concept to us. Very foreign. I remember when we went for our first interview at the Jewish day school. So the woman who was interviewing us realized that, we didn't have too much idea what was flying. So she said, we still Reformed by practice, but we belonged to a conservative synagogue. So she said, it's a Jewish school, boys will have to wear yarmulkes. That's fine. And she said, and they're not allowed, if they have a party or something, to have it on the Sabbath or Jewish holiday, because, no problem. And they can't bring food to the school because we're very strict about all the food should be kosher. That was fine. She said, and they'll be wearing tzitzis. And I looked at my wife, and my wife looked at me, I looked at my wife, she looked at me. I said, what are tzitzis? I never even heard the term before. So we were like this, they said my grandparents here, we were fresh off the boat when it came to Judaism. But we quickly saw it's unbelievable what was going on there. Such value, the Jewish people had such value, such great ideas, such beautiful ways to live. Like, where's this been?
You realize this because of the school?
Because of school and the learning. We started learning because we wanted to keep up with our kids. And by the 3rd grade, they just blew past us. But yeah, you just see what the heck is going on with Jewish people. And it's fantastic. Fantastic what we have.
How many hours of sleep are you getting these days?
Probably 6 to 6.5, which is not enough.
I want to get into at what point, now that you've realized that Judaism offers value, after you started learning on your own, in order to keep up and excel with your kids.
Yeah, which lasted, as I say, about 2 years. By the time our son got to the 3rd grade, they were past us.
Then at one point, did you start becoming involved with Jewish outreach organizations?
So, I could see the Jewish people were in trouble. I mean, for my own family, I could see it. I mean, my grandparents' generation, they were, between the 4 families, there were about 25 siblings, no intermarriage, no divorce, no assimilation. No one was observant. My parents' generation, there were about 75 of them that I know of, one intermarriage, two divorces. My generation, the whole thing fell apart Jewishly. I mean, no one was religious people, just Jewishly. I was able to go to my mother's 100th birthday party. I have 8 first cousins and 2 sisters. Between the 10 of them, they have 2 Jewish grandchildren. 1, 2. That's it. And that's what we saw happening. None of them had a Jewish education. None of them gave their kids much of a Jewish education. It's all over. So, there was a study, came out in 1975, in time for the American Bicentennial. And the study was how many Jews would be in America in 2076, the 300th anniversary of America. And their best case was 960,000. That was 6 million Jews to 960. And their most probable case was 420,000. And their worst case was under 100,000. And it really upset me. You know, the Jewish people going to disappear? What's that about? So I decided to try to find an organization to get involved with who could do something about that. Long story short, put in some time, over 18 months, met with Reverend Noah Weinberg in April of 1980. Saw that he was doing some amazing things, went back, checked him out, because now I was part of the Orthodox community, make sure it was the real thing, and then went back in 1981 and basically signed on to help him out. What he was trying to accomplish in bringing back Jews to understanding Jewish wisdom and becoming part of the Jewish world.
What was the strategy you thought of together?
It was not together. There was no together. Rabbi Weinberg was this genius, and I would figure out, what I could do. A lot of it was financial help. But Rabbi Weinberg had a understanding: if you knew something, you had to teach it. And I knew sales. I used sales to try to help them raise money. But I also found that I could speak with young people and be able to get them focused on getting more involved Jewishly.
When was that first experience?
Very early on, the early 1980s. I remember the first person I spoke to, I think it was 1983, maybe 1984, maybe even 1982. I had him in my office. I wasn't very good at it. Basically, pounded him for an hour and a half. We called up, we made a reservation, and now remember, no cell phones, no nothing. As soon as he left the office, he got the nearest payphone. I need to put money in a minute. Nearest payphone and canceled the reservation.
What was the reservation for?
To go to Israel to study. So eventually we met a few more times, and we actually got him to go. Meanwhile, we brought an Aish Hatorah branch out to Los Angeles. David Wilstein, who was a client and friend of mine, we brought it out together. He put up more of the money than I did because he had more money. So we had a fundraiser here for a year, and we brought in a teacher at the end of 1983, and things took off from there. And since then, Aish Hatorah has brought in a lot of teachers. Some have remained with Aish Hatorah, some have spun off, and it's been a fabulous run.
someone comes into your office, they don't know what you know. How do you get them to know?
So the answer is that I've worked at this point with, for sure, 4,000 young people, 18 to 32. Probably 5,000. I just don't like to use a number. For sure, 4,000. Everyone's an individual. The Almighty has never made two people exactly alike. He never will. Like, creates problems for the whole point of creation, which is we're created as individuals. And I just try to figure out where they are and answer their questions.
Okay.
There's no concept of convincing people to do things.
Right.
Rabbi Warmick said, no individual can convince another individual to do something. All you can do is you can focus their attention, which I do, on the experience of thousands of other young people like them who have chosen to put some time into studying.
What's the big deal of choosing to study?
The big deal is that most people in this society have no idea what they're living for. They are wasting their life. They're throwing away one day at a time. And it's gotten worse and worse because each year incrementally society goes downhill a little bit further. And it's just I meet with these people, it's sad. There's no connection to reality. You know, when I grew up, this was the definition of sanity. Now this is the definition of sanity. Now, without getting into this issue, that issue, what about this, what about that, it is clear to me that 85% of all individuals under age 50 today have a worldview, have ideas, live in ways that would have been defined as not sane when I was their age, whether they're 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. So it's not even Judaism, it's just getting back to some sense of sanity. And of course Judaism, since its instructions for living, is in fact the ultimate road to sanity, happiness, joy, fulfillment, meaning. That's the package deal.
Okay, so we'll wrap up. If there's one call to action that our listeners can take from you, what would you say?
Get in touch with Torah wisdom. Rabbi Weinberg said every person should ask themselves every morning when they get up, what the heck am I living for? Why am I here? And they should figure it out. What's your life purpose? And then, 3 times a day, they should stop and spend a minute or two reviewing what's going on. That's why we have a morning service, an afternoon service, an evening service. The morning service is, what the heck's my life about, and what am I going to do today to make progress towards my life's purpose. And traditionally mincha, so it's later afternoon, but traditionally mincha is in the afternoon, 1:30, 2 o'clock. How am I doing? Marav, the evening service, this time of year it's 8:30, 9 o'clock. Marav is, okay, another day passed, how'd they do? If you don't know what you're living for, you're a zombie. You're a zombie. You're just, one foot after the other, and you're not eating to live. You're living to eat. And it's like, up in the morning, have some breakfast, go to work, do your job, have some lunch, do your work. Maybe not do work so well. Maybe you've had too many drinks, or you drug thing, and then sort of use up the day and go to sleep. Wake up to another day like that.
All right. You should have much success continuing to bring light to the world as you do. Where can we find you? Anyone who wants to get in touch.
rhorowitz at aish.com, aish.com.
Signing off, this is Nissim from the Listen Nissim Show. Thank you and goodbye.